Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Dipo Josakoko, your product marketing manager here at MadCap Software. I'll be your webinar host for today, and I'll be introducing our presenters and handling all the logistics and the Q&A at the end of this webinar. I'll be keeping an eye on that Q&A panel, so if there are any technical issues, make sure you drop a line into the question box, and I hope I'll be able to resolve them in the background. We're very excited. I've got an excellent webinar for you. It's part 2 of one that we started a few weeks ago. And I'm really glad to be joined by Selena Lemoine, Madeline Boudreau, and our very own Katie Wilson. Just a little bit about each of our presenters today. Selena is a content architect and founder of Elegance in Chaos, who specialize in helping medical device manufacturers. With over 20 years of experience in technical communication, user experience, and content strategy, she's worked for fascinating industries such as medical devices, defense, content access, and printing. Now she's looking forward to sharing her experience, insights, and her professional journey. Fun fact, Selena is a hobbyist improviser, a storyteller, tabletop and live action role playing games player, and also a designer. Well, that's quite a lot she's packed in there. Also joining us today is Madeline. Madeline has worked as a technical writer for over 20 years. When she's not writing, she enjoys foraging for mushrooms and photographing insects. And Katie Wilson, Area VP of Sales and Resident Healthcare Tech Expert. Katie works with us at MadCap Software on the Xylem Enterprise Solutions side. Katie has launched a monthly series to address common insights and blockers seen across the healthcare industry. Pop over onto our website and see if you can sign up for receiving that newsletter. When she's not at work growing healthcare learning ecosystems, she's relaxing at home, growing her plants and her garden. And me again, I'll be taking part today. I'll be taking part in the conversation and helping out where I can. And just a little bit about me. I've been in France for the last 20 odd years. I completed my MA in technical communication, multilingual technical communication. And I spent the last 18 years working as a technical writer and proof editor. I've worked in fintech and medtech industries, and in a couple of years ago, 3 years ago to be exact, I made a move into content creation and marketing and landed this excellent job with MadCap Software as their product marketing manager. Just before I hand over to our guests for today, I'll do some housekeeping. First of all, we'll be recording this session. So if you can't make it to the end, you will receive a link to the recording, and that email will also include any questions that we might have not answered by the end of the webinar, as well as maybe any other resources that that your presenters today would like to share with you. At the end of the webinar, we do have a Q&A session, so please hold on for that. And feel free to type your questions into the question panel throughout the webinar. And we'll be sure to answer them at the end. If we do run out of time, like I said, we'll send those through to you by email. On the top right, you have links to downloadable resources, or that should be on the top left. And you've also got the question panel. I'll highlight that for you to see. The question panel is there. Type your question in, click submit, and we'll get that through to us. Note, though, that you will not see questions from other people. You only see your own question. There's a resources panel I just mentioned, and over there we've got links to any resources that we're sharing today. The panel at the bottom of your screen has icons to launch and reduce the different pods that you have. You're seeing us through the media player at the moment. We're not using the slide player today, but the media player, if you do need to, you can resize it. Just hover your mouse over the media player. You see some controls will pop up and you can resize, move it around the screen as and when you want. There's also a link to watch part 1 of this webinar. So if you missed that first part, click on that link. It'll take you on there. Just bookmark it and you can go back and watch it at a later date. Now, I think that's it for the housekeeping. Today's webinar is the second in our series on medical device documentation with MadCap Software. We're blending theory with practicality to unlock the complexities of content creation and management. While we continue this exploration with experts in the field, whether you're new to the field or you're a seasoned expert, you will find some really useful insights from our special guests today. So you'll be looking at the theory and practice of medical device documentation. You'll see some time-saving strategies for content updates and compliance. We've got a practical demonstration of MadCap Flair being used in a medical device industry. It's an example though, so you won't see any state secrets in there. And we've got global insights into regulatory requirements and documentation strategies. So without any further ado, I'll say take it away, Solana.
Thank you, Deepo. So this is a quick recap of what happened in part one. Next slide, please. Yes. So where are you? Is your content set in stone, literally, or is it chopped up into small modular pieces that you can use and reuse over and over again, depending on what your needs are at this given time? This is where we stopped at the last webinar. So now you have your answer. You know where you are. If you're still carving stone, that's not going to budge, or if you are, well, getting into a more agile attitude. Next slide. So where does structured content meet regulation? This is something I'm absolutely convinced of. After 20 years in content strategy and 12 years in medical devices, I find that structured content enables companies to meet a lot of regulation requirements. And we can go all the way to display all the slides. If you can go on clicking, please. What are my most favorite important thing is that there's one single point of truth for any type of information. And once this point of truth is accepted, validated by everybody, it allows to reuse over and over again. And the gains are consistency, easier updates because you update something only once, ensures that you save a lot of money on localization, and increases accelerates rather your time to market. Because your content is completely separated from your layout, you can actually validate everything right at the source level. You do not have to read an 80 or 126 pages document to validate it. You can just validate that the product name is this and not anything else. And because your content is stored intelligently, you can also set up workflows for creation, validation, and auditing. The beauty of having content separate from your layout is that you can automate publication and you can publish in any format that you want or any type of output that is needed. So for instance, until now you were delivering your technical documentation to one notified body. You have to change for any kind of reason, but the second notified body requires your documentation in a different format with a different structure and a different organization. Well, this is very easy to do when you have structured content. And the last thing I love about structured content is that it is stored in a database, which immediately comes with possibility of versioning it, increasing traceability, and you can actually plug this also to issue tracking. So every time something changes in your content, you know why, when, and by whom. Isn't that a dream? Next slide, please. So, why is regulatory framework something that you can actually turn to your advantage instead of putting some burden on your shoulders? Because the regulatory framework demonstrates that manufacturers know what they do, how they do it, and why they do it. And this, in turn, enables manufacturers to demonstrate to health agencies that the devices proposed to go on the market actually have a proper risk-benefit balance and that they support public health outcomes, and that the manufacturer will be answerable to anything that is thrown their way. Something we focus today on is risk assessment. Risk assessment first relies on your risk management the standard ISO 14971, which feeds into the quality management system. And the quality management system also has requirements for the risk management. So this is a happy loop, very virtuous, that feeds your risk assessment and your quality management system. Not one of them is set in stone. This is something that grows with your company and that accompanies the devices all the way to the market and even after. Next slide. So what is risk assessment, evaluation, control, and monitoring? Why is it important? Well, this is medical devices. We are here to improve health outcomes, not cause more harm that we want to do. What is ISO 14971? It is here to help manufacturers identify the hazards associated with the medical devices, how to control it, and how to ensure that the controls are indeed effective. And as the medical device regulation says, risk management shall be understood as a continuous iterative process throughout the entire life cycle of a device, requiring regular systematic updating. I also find this is a great way to get an entire company see things on the same level. Next slide, please. Let's talk about general requirements for safety and performance. Once you have identified the class, the risk class associated with your medical devices, then you understand what kind of general requirements for safety and performance apply. Most of them can be found in the Annex 1 of the Medical Device Regulation 2017-745, 746 for in vitro medical devices. This is very short expert. It says that for each device, a risk management plan must be put in place, and that the manufacturer is responsible to identify and analyze the hazards associated with each device. These are the RSP, and there's a ton more. These are the ones we're going to be focusing on today. Next slide, please. So in order to reduce risks, one of the cool things that structured content allows is to repurpose content. For instance, one of the requirements says that the manufacturer is responsible to provide information for safety. These two icons underneath do exactly that. The first one, the number 2 in a circle with a bar, says that this device can be used one time and one time only. After having been used on a patient, it must be disposed of. And it must be disposed of in a biomedical waste container, so it is securely disposed of. Now, these two icons, these two logos, are defined by a standard. This is something that is found in every single documentation you can think of regarding medical devices with single use. But then what happens when the standard evolves? Are you going to copy-paste the new logo into each and every one of your documents? Or would you rather update it in one place and from then have it populate your entire documentation corpus? Next slide, please. So, Madeleine,
yes,
please enlighten us.
Okay, so I'm going to take you all through a little bit of a journey with a medical device that we have made up for the purpose of this webinar. And most of us as technical writers may have experienced a little fun activity where we try to write how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Well, I decided to take it a step further and make a document, an information for use or IFU document, for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as a medical device for the treatment of hunger. So I hope no one's too hungry right now, because you might be by the end of this. So very quickly, this is an example of the hazard analysis that I performed for our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I thought about all the ways that it could be a hazardous, that hazards could arise. Came up with a few items here. So we have a few hazards during setup or creation, such as a user making the sandwich might lick the knife after spreading the peanut butter. Kind of a common thing if you're making it for yourself, but you wouldn't want to do it if you were making it for somebody else. And a couple of things can happen if you lick the knife. You could cause contamination of the final product if you then put the knife back into the peanut butter on the sandwich, or you could cut your tongue when you licked that knife. Also, some users might use the same utensil in the peanut butter and in the jelly, and that could cause some cross-contamination and make the jelly go bad later. We also have some disposal risks. We might discard the leftover sandwich in compost heat, and that might attract pests, or we might feed that to the dog, and that could be dangerous because some peanut butter contains xylitol, which is bad for dogs. And then finally, we identified a operation risk, which is that some users might react poorly to peanuts because of a peanut allergy. So now we've identified some failure modes and some cause of the failure modes. Now we've got to do a little math. Not my favorite thing, but here we go. We're going to look at the probability of these things happening. It's pretty likely someone might lick the knife. It's not too likely someone might feed xylitol to a dog because not all peanut butter contains xylitol, and not everyone has a dog. But peanut allergies are very high probability. They're very common. We're going to look at the effect or harm of each of these: contamination, dog poisoning, serious injury. And we're going to think about the severity. The severity of contamination could be pretty high. The severity of peanut allergy, very high. The severity of dog poisoning, high, let's say. But the severity of cutting your tongue on the knife, not so high. Butter knives aren't really that sharp. We do some math. We multiply probability by severity, and we determine anything which is high or medium, red or yellow. Those are the ones we're going to have to address. Now, our control methods, we usually want them to be done at the design level, but some things can't be controlled at the design. We can't control whether our user uses xylitol containing peanut butter, for example. So we're going to warn the user of the safety risks. And in the case of the peanut allergy, we are going to do a design mitigation. We're going to make a product that's available without peanut butter. So now we've done our risk analysis, we're going to translate that content into some requirements. We have other requirements that are not related to the risk analysis as well. So you see, we have here our internal requirement numbers. We have the links, where those go. In the case of the ones that are driven by the hazard analysis, we've mentioned that. And in the case of ones driven by an ISO standard, such as a do not reuse symbol that Selena talked about, we're pointing to the ISO requirement. So now we've identified all of our requirements for our documentation. Of course, a real device would have many more. Now we're going to go over and we're going to look at MadCap Flare and how this works in reality. So the first thing to look at here is this is our table of contents for our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. We have over here in the concepts, we have created concepts for each of our requirements, including the requirements for symbols. There's our do not reuse symbol requirement, and requirements for our warnings, such as shall warn of a cutting risk from licking the knife. And if we open one of these, so when we look at the concept, we can actually see here where it's used. It's used in this symbol here, do not reuse symbol. And if we had to change this at any time, we could change it in this single place. This is a snippet, which is being used here in our symbols section. And right there, we see our do not reuse symbol. If I want to build any number of outputs for peanut butter and grape jelly, peanut butter and cherry jelly, or almond butter and grape jelly, I have a single source for this content, completely reusable. Another thing that we want to make sure that we've done is someone comes to me and says, Madeline, have we remembered to warn about the risks of xylitol, let's say, or have we remembered to warn about the risk of licking the knife? I can say, yes, look here. It's right here in our setup section. I can double click that, and here's our setup section. Now you'll note that we have some variables. We'll talk about that in just a minute briefly. But if I scroll down here, here we go. Here's a warning. It says, don't lick the knife. They can be sharp. They might cut your tongue, and they can spread germs to the end user. Of course, wording we wouldn't use in a real document. And here are our concepts pointing to the requirement numbers. And then finally, we need to talk about the mitigation for the allergy. So we have created here in our specifications, we've used some variables to point to the type of filling as well as the flavor of jelly. And if I want to look at how this looks in my default document, grape, peanut butter, and grape jelly, I can look very quickly and see filling type, peanut butter. Let me make that a little bit bigger for y'all. Filling type is peanut butter, and you see here it says peanut butter and grape jelly sandwich, information for use. But what's that going to look like for almond butter? Very quickly switch over. And here we say almond butter and grape jelly, and filling type is now almond butter. So in one fell swoop, one document, we're using variables to control the final output of the filling, and we are reusing everything that we can reuse. And finally, and this is my favorite part, but that's just me, we have this thing that I call the requirements map. This uses a Flare concept proxy that's going to pull all of the information from our concepts over here into the final output of the document so that our verification and validation folks can very quickly check and make sure that all of their requirements are addressed. So here is my final PDF, information for use for almond butter and grape jelly. Down here at the bottom, my requirements map shows every requirement that's met in this output and where it's met in the document itself. So to scroll down a little bit and find my information for use shall inform users of the filling type or flavor type. Here we see it says almond butter and it's on page 1. The V&V folks can very quickly go to page 1 and say, ah, yes, we have mentioned the filling flavor. Now, in real life, I worked for a company that had multiple 500-page documents, IFUs, for their products, with hundreds of requirements. Before I introduced this requirements map, it took 2 employees a full week together, 80 hours, to check all of those requirements. After we introduced the requirements map, that went down to 2 employees 1 day, literally 80 hours down to 16 hours, multiple times a year for checking those documents. So that's the power of that requirements map, using concepts to map up to your requirements and your hazard analysis. And with that, we will go back to our, I'm sorry, I brought up the wrong thing here. There we go. No. I'm sorry, please bear with me. Here we are.
No worries.
And so there, Selena, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. I just love this explanation with peanut butter. So content reuse, when focusing again on a medical device, I find that Flare is a very nice tool for small writing teams. Imagine you're a manufacturer who has families of medical devices, like the ones pictured. Well, their indication for use may be very close or the same. Their classification may be the same. The warnings associated with the use of these medical devices are the same. The cleaning, disinfection, sterilizations are the same. And the manufacturer information are the same. So in my practice as an independent consultant, I find that for the same class, devices belonging to the same family, the percentage of reuse goes anywhere from 60% to 80%. So that's 60% to 80% written once, reused hundreds of times. Next slide, please.
All right. Hello, this is Katie Wilson. So I'm coming from the Xyleme side, and I was asked to talk today about how we help solve the challenge of scale when it comes to content. So I'll just talk briefly on this slide, and I'm sure everybody's experienced this in some way in your own organization. But if we're talking about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, let's follow that through. Let's pretend like we're creating one document that's a standard operating procedure on how to create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Everybody's done that. Everybody can do that with probably the team they have today. Then, when you move into delivery outputs, maybe somebody wants to know how to create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the field. So they need a micro learning. Maybe we have somebody that's used to creating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They just need a user guide so they can quickly reference things. Maybe we're teaching a group of people how to make peanut butter and jellies. So we need some instructor-led training manuals. Then moving into, so now we've got all of these different outputs we're working with. Then we talk about audiences. Maybe this isn't for one hospital. Maybe we're working with multiple hospitals that now need to create these PB&Js, and we need to throw some proprietary information in there. And now maybe we're in the US and they're all in different states, and all of the different states have regulations on how we mention if there's xylitol in the peanut butter and jelly or not. So really quickly, you can see how this scales and goes from creating one document to now we might have hundreds of versions of the same document. This is a challenge that I hear about every day at Xyleme, and this can even get out of hand with a group of 3 to 5 authors. Madeline, if you'll go to the next slide, I can talk about how we address this with componentized authoring. So how do we as MadCap address this? And you'll see on the next slides further that we address this at multiple different levels, whether you have 3 or 100 authors. But by decoupling your content from format and making it reusable, searchable, putting it all in one place, we enable you to use your content like building blocks. So your authors are no longer sitting there and trying to figure out how to format this PowerPoint slide, or how to turn a PowerPoint into an e-learning, or how to get that information into your LMS. We take that away by decoupling the content from format again. So you can use your content like building blocks to use the same content to create different types of learning and distribute that learning quickly to the learners that you need. You can go to the next slide, Madeline. And I'm talking about this really quickly. So there are obviously more steps like creating the templates for each output, things like that we help you with. But the reason why we do this, the reason why standardization is so important is because it enables you to do all of the innovative things, or your content authors to do all of the creative and innovative things that they want. This now allows them to personalize at scale because they're not spending their time on these repetitive manual tasks, or spending time that really has nothing to do with getting better learning out to your learners. Because we're doing it in this way, it enables you to search, it enables you to communicate with other technologies that are ancillary to your learning content environment. And again, focus on really neat things like skills ontologies or working on large language models in order to predict what content you need to be creating within your organization. Like I said at the beginning, MadCap offers many different solutions for anywhere you fall on the maturity journey in your content strategy. I'll pass it to Dippo to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Katie. Next slide, please. And one of the most popular questions is like, how do I know which system to use? Which one's right for me? And I thought, well, the best way to maybe do that is to describe a journey, because you might fall in, you could start your journey at the beginning, or start it all the way at the end. And so we thought, well, there's this peanut butter and jelly sandwich maker, and they've eventually developed a little robot that can make these sandwiches. And so they've got a little startup, little robot making machines, making these sandwiches. To make that, to teach people how to use the robot, need a user manual. So they hired a technical writer who's writing that user manual and the one service manual. And this is where most startups make that mistake, in that they start off with MS Word, Microsoft Word or Google Docs or something like that, to create their document amendments and user guides. But they find that very quickly things start getting difficult to manage. And so usually by the time they realize that, by the time they start growing, and then they've grown to 2 tech writers, they're creating 2 user manuals, 1 service manual. And by that time, they need to start being able to reuse content. They need to be able to manage their terminology, and they need to be able to make document updates very quickly. And so to be able to do reuse, they adopted Flair. And basically that worked for them because you've now moved into topic-based writing as a small entity. However, their machine is really successful. They've acquired a couple of other machines. The company's growing, and they've grown up all the way up to 6 technical writers. They're creating 3 user manuals. They've got 6 service manuals now, and they're distributing for 3 products. And as you know, products usually go through versions, and you usually have many versions of the same product out in different markets at the same time. And so what became important to them was version control, workflow management, to be able to like know exactly where they are and be able to meet their go-to-market goals. They also, because they had 6 technical writers now working in different locations, different cities, some of them working at home, they needed real-time collaboration with their engineers and also between each other. And the documentation manager, about that time, you've got 6 writers, you got to know what's happening with the project, who's on time, who's late, what's running. And so they needed project tracking. At that point, Central becomes central to their content production process, because it allows you to do all of that collaboration, real-time reviews and approvals. And it also adds source control to their matrix. Now with Flair, you can connect Flair to Git. However, Central offers you a little bit more than an external Git thing. It basically gives you all your project collaboration and tracking and all those other features, as well as being able to host your content on Central and have analytics to see who's using what. However, again, companies growing, and now they've expanded, and now they're at an enterprise level of content. The company is an
Content strategy
enterprise now.
management.
It's basically, pardon?
Oh, go ahead. I was just saying they're at a different
Sorry.
level of content strategy management.
There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you very much, Katie. And so, well, basically, they've got 10 technical writers now. They're serving globally. They've got like 4 user manuals, 10 service manuals. Pick the number that you want. Basically, they've expanded. They've got many more products, and now they've got 1 regulated product, because now they're actually serving to hospitals. And because they're serving to hospitals, they're selling their machine to a hospital, they need to make sure that, they comply with any regulations of hospital medical device type of products. And so what was important to them now was being able to scale. They needed to look to the future and think, it's going so well. Over the last 6 years, we've grown up to this enterprise point. We want to be able to grow global. And so scalability is important to us. Compliance is important to us. Being able to trace what happened when, version control, being able to report and easily pass through audits, connecting their systems to third-party R&D, so connecting the writing tools to the requirements database, to a risk analysis database, to any other QMS tools within the company. That becomes really important for them. And also now they've got 250 employees. They've got to train those employees. So they've hired 4 instructional designers and 2,500. They're serving to 2,500 customers. Some of them need instructions for use, and some of them need instructions for training to learn how to use the machine. And so basically they've got a choice. They can either go for Ixious CMS to handle all of that, because with DITA, you can produce both technical documentation and learning content. Or they can go for Xylem, because Xylem can handle structured content and create technical manuals, as well as learning and development content. Or in this case, what they did, which was the smart move, was they got each system dedicated to what it's supposed to do. So Ixious CMS for their technical writing department, and Xylem for their instructional designers. And that way, each silo, if you want, did not need to learn a new tool, And then with our vision for the future, these tools are going to be able to talk to each other and actually exchange information between each other. So procedures that are created in the technical writing department can be used directly from source without copy and pasting by the instructional designers. And I thought that would be an excellent way to describe the journey. Where are you in this journey? Go on to the next slide, please. And so Lena is going to tell us about some of the built-in capabilities in Flair that she has been using as, an advisor in medical device industry.
Exactly. Thank you, Deepo. So something that is really built in with Flair, so that's one single tool. Something that is very useful for regulatory people is the version control. You can plug Flair either into Central or into any other control version system kit, namely. And that gives you the traceability, that gives you mostly the insurance that nothing will ever be lost. That's crucial. It's very easy to lose a Word document. It's very easy. You can't lose a Flair project if it's plugged into version control. That's one of the things for safety. The second thing is that because it is modular content, it is easier for regulatory people to validate whatever is common once and for all, and then to focus on the differences between the medical devices, the specificities, be they in their conception, in their use, or possibly depending on the market to which they are destined. And lastly, Flair allows you to build very quickly and seamlessly various outputs. PDF, which seems to be still a favorite of notified bodies and health agencies, HTML file, which is good when you want to share the documentation within your company, and many more formats as needed. So one tool, you can already do all this. And when you're starting from Word, it's day and night. Next slide, please.
Okay, so while I thought I'd talk about the capabilities that Ixious ECMS offers, because each of our solutions here at MadCap Software can cater to anyone in a regulated environment. And so let's go on to the next slide, please, and I'll talk about one of the ways that Ixious ECMS can help out. And that's with a dynamic release management module. Now, traditionally known as branch and merge, Ixious ECMS calls this dynamic release management. And basically what it does is it creates a logical separation of content for you. And so you're able to create content for several products, several releases of that product, and several versions of that product, each working independently, but able to come back together and merge. So what typically happens is that you start creating a new version for your robot, for your sandwich making robot. However, you still need to keep updating the current version. That new feature that you're introducing cannot yet. It still has to go through regulatory approval and so on and so forth. So you're able to create a version of that, a branch of your release, and then continue updating that while still creating new content, new deliverables on the trunk branch of it. The advantage here is that you're able to continue delivering, continuous delivery. You've got a faster go-to-market because you're able to quickly approve that version that's on the branch, and then you're able to easily, with a merge function, merge that seamlessly back into the trunk and release. And it's got all its approvals, all the traceability, all the audit controls that have gone on that branch that are carried over into it, and everything is stored under the one major product. Next slide, please. I'll hand over to Katie, who's going to talk to us about how Xyleme actually manages that.
Yes, thank you, Dippo. So remember the slide I showed where I was talking about all of the really cool things people want to do with their content, like creating large language models so they can use predictive AI in order to predict what content they need to produce. In order to get there in our highly regulated industry, we have some more challenges. A couple of the challenges people bring to me when they don't have a single source of content is versioning. And people think about versioning usually for two different reasons. Either they want to be able to make changes to their content quickly, change one document and see it change across their organization, or they need to have an audit trail for their content. They need to be able to show who created the content, who reviewed the content, and when, which version learners are on now, which learners have taken that version of the content, which is a very tough draw if you don't have your content all in one place to be managed, to have these audit trails and easily view them. I'll tell a really short customer story that happened back in COVID to one of my customers. They had an auditor on site and had to change a very small detail that appeared in hundreds of documents across their organization. And because they used a central repository like Xylem, they were able to make that change before the auditor left the building. Now, I'll pass it to either Selena or Dippo. I'm not sure which one's going to cover this, but we're going to talk about next how you decide when you're ready for an enterprise solution.
Yes, next slide. Thank you, Katie. Yes, so ask yourself the questions. Is anything on this slide of importance to you? My customers move on to structured content because they are really worried of losing their certification, or even worse, not obtaining it, therefore killing their company even before it got off the ground. Also, they want to have as painless audit as possible. So they want to enable full traceability and audit tracking for anything that surrounds the medical device. Something I want to point now is that before the device hits the market, before it is authorized to hit the market, the only thing that exists, that is visible, that is assessed, is the surrounding documentation, technical documentation around this. Right until that point, this device doesn't exist. So that's why it's very critical to get your documentation and your content as the proper asset it is to your company, properly managed, intelligently managed. So you can refer to the slide, what is important to you. And depending on how many elements you're ticking, well, then maybe it is time to seriously evaluate what structured content can do to you. Dippo, do you want to elaborate on something?
Well, I mean, basically, from my point of view, by the time you get through to that stage where you do start getting complex content, you start needing workflows to make sure that you're not missing out anyone who needs to actually approve a document. You mentioned losing your certification is important to you. Well, any of these could cause you to lose your certification. At that point, you want to start considering using some sort of enterprise solution. And then the next bet would the next thing to look at is the size of your enterprise. You know, are you going to become a global meta-sized company, or are you going to still stay within a small size, in which case then you look at which solution best meets your requirements. You can go on to the next slide, please. And I'll ask Katie to give us just a few metrics on return on your investment.
Time to spill some tea. So people always want to know how much things cost, right? And what I can guarantee you is if you end up talking to Xylem or Ixia, we can get you there in about probably 2 conversations, just because everybody's so different and we want to make sure we map your environment correctly. However, I can share on a webinar some of our outcomes that our customers have seen. Companies like Allina Health, which is a popular hospital system here in the US, was able to save 66% of time, which translates to cost for them for content development. So that's for new content. Another large hospital system in the US here is Abbott Northwestern. They were able to save 50% time savings on content maintenance. That's just maintaining the content that they already have. One that's become increasingly important, especially in pharma, has been translation costs. Johnson Controls was able to save 40% on translations costs because of the way we componentize content, and because we're not tied to an output like SCORM, we can deliver it to translators in a way that's much more efficient, saving you money. There are a lot of other things we can talk about. One thing we haven't addressed on this is APIs and connectivity to the rest of your technology system, but there are also wins there too. I will pass this back to Dippo.
Okay. And next slide, please. Talking about APIs and connectivity, that's where our new era in content management comes in. Traditionally, there's been this big silo between technical documentation and learning and development content. And basically, for many years, we've been trying to break these silos. And our vision now at MadCap Software, with the acquisition of Xylem, with the acquisition of XCSC CMS, is rather than continuing trying to break these silos, let's look at bridging them. And because we've got such extensive API connections between all our systems, our idea is that in the future, all our systems will be able to talk to each other. So whether you're using Flare, Central, or XCSC CMS for creating your technical documentation, or you're using Xylem for your learning and development content, very soon, you're going to be able to pass that information, the raw XML files that you're using, along with all the metadata and all the approvals and all of that sort of stuff that goes with it, will be able to move easily between each of the systems. So that procedure that you wrote for the machine, rather than sending a PDF to your learning and development department, this time they'll just be able to pick up that source code directly and push it out to their learning content management system. And the other way around as well. If they found like, that a certain form of training is really working well, well, why not write that out as an instruction for use? And it's already been written out. Just take the pure code. It's already been validated. You don't need to revalidate it, and then integrate that in your technical documentation. Next slide, please. Now, we had quite a lot of feedback from the first part of this webinar, and we thought, well, it sounds really great. We got great registration on for this week, part 2 as well. Would you like a further session? Would you like a part 3? Please use the question and answer panel to let us know if you'd like a part 3. And then the second question, what should we focus on in part 3? Would you like to see more practical examples? I see some of the questions, and we're going to answer 1 or 2 of those questions after this. But would you like to see more actual practical demos? Would you like to see the impact on your content following a merger or acquisition? Or as a startup, should you be using structured content? Would you like us to answer those questions? Going international, what's the impact on localization, translation, and other regulations? Or any other questions? Drop that into the Q&A box, and I'll give you a minute to do that. And we'll use that to plan for a part 3 if you do want one. I should have had some music on hand to
You want me to sing, Dippo? You don't.
I'll go for it. Okay, just give another couple of seconds, and looks like we're running right on time.
Yay. That makes me happy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to questions and answers then. We've got some really interesting ones out here. Okay. Question number 1. this looks like it's directed at Madeline. Is the requirements map created by the tech writer manually?
No, it is not. It is the creation of the concepts is created manually. So when you add a piece of information, such as a new warning icon, for example, that reuse, you create the concept manually at that point. Beyond that, there's no more manual work. When you build that requirements map, it finds every topic that has in your output that has a concept. It will find the concepts, it'll put them in that map, and it'll say what that content is connected to the concept and where it can be found. That's all automated by Flare.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Another question on here. How do you submit red lines between versions? I started answering that one offline, but I thought, like, I'd put it out there. Now, and I'll let actually Katie answer how Xyleme does that. I'll answer how Ixia does that. And I hope maybe Selena will be able to answer how Flare does it. Otherwise, I'll jump on that one as well. So with Ixia, basically, the Ditter Open Toolkit allows you to do quite a lot. And one of the parameters that you can set up is redlining. So you can set up with by working on the output generator, which is based on the Ditter Open Toolkit, set up a parameter so that you can print what is effectively a change between documents and send that for review. I hope that answers on the Ixia CCMS side. On the Flare side, I think that well, by activating track changes, you are able to print a version, output a version that has those track changes visible. I hope someone will correct me on that, but I am pretty sure that is the way that is done on that side. And on Xyleme side?
Xyleme. So for our review, we actually have a really robust review process because often we're working with companies that are not only in a highly regulated field, but have multiple reviewers that they need a document to pass through. It's very much like a named shared file. You would choose your reviewers. You would also send them to any other authors, but happy to show that on a subsequent meeting if that's what people want to do, because there are many options for how to review and how audit ready you need your reviews to be. So it'll all depend on your own individual requirements.
Yeah. And I mean, all three of our tools have got collaborative reviews. So that red line between version is basically, I consider that old school. That's like old school, you create a PDF. If you want really to streamline your workflow, you want to use the collaborative review processes that are available through all of our all three solutions that you've got on here. By adding Central to Flare, you're able to do collaborative real-time reviews with your SMEs, and they're able to see what's changed in real time. With Ixia CCMS, that's the same. You use the Oxygen web author, and that's got collaborative review built in there. And as Katie just mentioned, you've got that function available in Xyleme as well. And this means that rather than sending a red line to someone who might not know the context as to why and when, and then they'll send you back an email with questions on it, you could do that in real time with that person and get those questions and answers done in real time. Comments are included in that review process as well. And you can actually even archive that, so you don't have to start looking or saving emails as to what comments were made. Next question, is there any tool for bug defect reporting? Not quite sure what that pertains to. We'll take that one offline, or if you could clarify what that question is, because that would not be a documentation tool for reporting bugs. However, you can create outputs that allows you to create feedback buttons And you could use those feedback buttons to get reviews and feedback on the content after it's been published or pushed out, or you could do a pre-publication, send that out and get those, and then you use that for defect reporting. That's one of the output classes that you can have. Next question. How does it find content? Is there any metadata defined? That is a little bit unclear, but speaking about metadata.
I can talk about that one from a Xylem standpoint, if you want. So for Xylem, and I'm not sure about for Central, but Xylem, everything has metadata attached to it. That is how you find the content. That's how the content's searchable, and that's how people are building their repositories for content. A lot of my pharma companies are building their own internal AI in order to generate content because they can't use something like ChatGPT. So for us at Xylem, metadata is a huge part of what we do.
Yep, and that's basically the same. And like structured content is XML. XML allows you to add additional information in the form of attributes to the elements in there, and those attributes will contain like that metadata, and Ditto is a specialist in that as well. And so yes, you can add metadata, and that's the same, and a concept that Madeline was showing off is a form of metadata. It's like, you know, adding that additional information to information about information is that metadata. So there is metadata, and the way Ixia is also set up is that it's a flat database. And so basically you don't go around creating folders and buckets to put stuff in. Everything is flat, and you just basically search for that content in there. So you're looking for a topic, search for the metadata, and all those topics will come up to you. And that's pretty much the way that works on that side as well. Looking at the questions, we've still got another 3 minutes to go. So I would like to see the review process. Yeah, we can set that up. Please you could either contact us for a full demo. Go onto the MadCap Software website, and you can ask for a demo for each of our systems, or if you have a preference for one particular one, please go ahead and make that request. And in the next webinar, we could include that review process in there because that would be interesting. Since the reviewers would like to see differences and also maintain review feedback or for audit. So yeah, that I think was what we answered in, like, if you do a collaborative review with track changes on, you'll get all that red line. You get the basic track changes thing. So you get stuff that's crossed out and replaced by in a different color, and you can have different colors assigned. You also have notes as to who made what changes, and then overall control by the author to accept or reject changes based on whoever was that person that made the feedback. So it's a really robust process, and you're able to also archive that feedback that you've got, so you know who made what feedback and why you made a particular change, and all of that is available for audit. Integration with Jira, Jama, test tools, and things like that. We've got APIs, and you're able to do quite a lot of interesting things with our tools. I know one particular organization that's using Ixia CCMS, connecting it with another massive requirements tool, and they're actually even using AI to build knowledge graphs, and they're able to then query those knowledge graphs and get information about the requirements in order to build the content they're writing in their documentation department. Katie, connection with
I got excited about that question. So at Xylem, we use our own proprietary RESTful APIs to connect with ancillary systems. So that can include Jira, Jama. It could include your LMS and LXP, could include your own databases. I have a lot of customers with a couple of different technologies of each of them, but we're able to connect as long as they have something on their side that we can write to. Depending on what you need to do, we might have pre-built connectors because there are a lot of technologies we work with quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Same on this side. Do you have any recommendations for naming files? Ooh, now that's a whole webinar.
Yeah.
On the data side, I would, just very quickly, first of all, you type information. So you type it into a concept, into a task, into a reference type of information. And then basically you could just say like, well, everything that's a concept starts with a C underscore. Anything that's a task is a task underscore. And then you still got to work on the rest of the naming convention. And that is just basically, as long as it's written down, it's documented, and everyone follows it, that's the best way to go ahead. There's just so many combinations on there. And then the final question, because
yeah, I can answer this last one too. Largest types of documentations we've worked on, just because they're probably in my wheelhouse. Outside of our space, largest documentation of this type would be Google, Meta, Wells Fargo. Within our space, the medical device and pharma space, I would say it's, of the names I can say, Johnson & Johnson, Kaiser Permanente, and AstraZeneca.
Massive. Yeah, and I've not checked with our customers, but I know that we've got some customers with massive documentation sets, and in terms of size, I know there's like gigabytes of content.
Nope. Wells Fargo is our biggest depot, and even they haven't broken through our content maximum where they'd have to add anymore. But I don't know, because Meta's going to be tight on their heels now. But I think the question is, just because so many people have so much documentation, especially in the medical space, that I can pretty much guarantee that no matter how much you have, we work with somebody that has as much, if not more.
If not more, yeah. I mean, looking at the size of the global entities that we serve, they've got massive content. I mean, I think there's a couple of customers that I know have a service manual that's at least 600 pages long. I'd have to check on that, but yeah, from memory, there's at least, and like, that's just one of their service manuals. They had many service manuals. So
yeah, and we've got people loading service manuals directly into medical devices in hospitals, and because it's not a human readable manual, some of them are thousands of pages long.
Yeah. Okay, so well, we've come to the end of our webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our presenters. So Lena, I'm looking forward to doing a part 3. Let's see, how we can get that going and put that together. Thank you very much, Madeline, and for showing us that really very interesting way of that most people haven't thought of doing this, connecting that sort of information in there and making your audit process really great. Madeline wrote a blog post about this. You'll find that on our website. So just pop in there and do a search on the blog site for Madeline's name, and you'll come up on that. Katie, thank you very much for joining us again. I hope to see you in the next one, where we'll be doing more practical demos. Thanks everyone, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for spending some time with us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.